Hello, dear friends. I'd like to give a talk about blessings and curses. I guess it also somehow pertains to reward and punishment. And this is an idea which we find twice, at least, in a significant way in the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy. I would like to attempt to explain this. The first place is Parchat Re'eh, which is in chapter 11. And in chapter 11, it says, Re'eh, you shall see, Anochi noten lifnechem, hayom, this day, I am setting before you the blessing and the curse. And then Moses continues and says, the blessing, if you shall listen to the mitzvot, the commandments of your Lord God, which I am commanding you today. And the curses, if you do not listen to the commandments of the Lord your God, and you stray from the path which I am teaching you today, and you start going after other gods who you did not know. And then Moses says, and when you come to the land, you shall give the blessing on the mount of Gerizim, near the city of Shechem, and the curse on the mount of Eval. Now, I know later on, in the book of Devarim, this is exactly what happens in chapter 27, Parchat Kitavo, meaning, when I say it happens, meaning then Moses reiterates exactly what they're supposed to do. It actually only happens in the book of Joshua, chapter 8. So what is the point of putting this? What is the point of putting this then in two parts? Why first talk about in Re'eh, and then explain what you're talking about, that it's an actual ceremony, only in Kitavo, a few parshiot later. And then, of course, well, the fact that it actually happens when they enter the land, I guess that's quite obvious. My opinion that what's happening here is a statement about blessings and curses, reward and punishment in general. What is reward and punishment? A lot of people think that, well, what the Torah is saying is you follow the commandments and you're a good boy and good girl, God will give you what you deserve, and if you're bad, whatever. But in general, we say that Schar mitzvot v'haya al maleka, the Talmud says in Kiddushin, there is no reward for the mitzvot in this world. So if you're talking about the divine retribution or divine reward and punishment, that's for the afterlife, which also has to be understood. So what exactly is happening? There is some things in this world. And what is it exactly? And this also has a Mishnaic basis. I think the first thing that's being said is something like this, that Moses is trying to say. Today I'm setting before you in general that you should know there is blessing and curses in life. And if you want blessing in your life, then go after the commandments that God gave you that I'm teaching you today, because that will be bring blessing into your life. And you know what will bring curses into your life and bad things and negativity? If you do not listen to God's commandments and you stray off the path and you go after the foreign gods, that will bring negativity and curse into your life. I think the first statement here is what we say in English, what comes around goes around. What you put into your life is going to come back at you. When you put in good things in your life and you are nice to people, they're going to be nice back to you. They're going to want your good. And when you put in negativity into the world, people are going to want bad things for you. What comes around goes around. Now, another thing which has to be explained here is, what does it mean to bring foreign gods into your life? It says in the Torah that God created man, the capital M, in his image. There's something godly within human beings. vis-a-vis the rest of creation. We have the ability to transcend the natural world. Of course, we also have the ability to destroy the natural world. It's a big responsibility, it's a choice. What is idol worship? Idol worship means that mankind creates gods in its image. So we create gods in our image, that's idolatry. It's not bowing down to sticks and stones. It has to do with a mindset. We want to control everything about our universe, not just the natural universe, but even the transcending powers of this universe. We want to be in control. It says already in the book of Breshit, they wanted to create Amigdal v'rosho b'shamayim. That they, in Babylon, they wanted to make the Tower of Babylon, which would be a tower with its heads in the heavens, to battle God, the Midrash says. But we want to control the universe. All the pharaohs in Egypt, they had their chartumim, their magicians, who would be involved in black magic. When Moses comes and he brings his staff, which turns into a serpent, they do the same thing. They know lots of tricks. And then every king later on would have their astrologers who were telling them what's going to happen. And people want shamans who will tell them how to connect to those higher worlds. And this idol worship is all for self-interest. It's all for power and for gain. It's the exact opposite of the Torah. The Torah is ethical, it's altruistic. Idol worship is all about me. So Moses is basically teaching lesson number 1. When you bring blessing into the world through your very actions, your deeds, your thoughts, and the way you speak, that brings blessing back to you. It's a boomerang. When you bring curses into your life and negativity and egocentrism, that's what it's going to bring back to you, because what comes around goes around. That's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2. What does it actually say in Kitavo when it actually describes these blessings and curses? It actually only explains it in the negative for some reason. I'll explain that. But it says like this, chapter 27. So Moses said to the people, verse 11, these are the ones who shall stand on the Mount of Gerizim, which is the mountain of the blessing. These tribes, and all these tribes are tribes of children of Leah and Rachel, these 6. And these tribes shall stand on the mountain of Aval, the mountain of the curse. And as pointed out by Rashbam, these are the tribes of the maidens, the servants. Banu Levim, and the Levites shall be in the middle, and they shall answer. And there are 10 things that they say. And here in Devarim, it's brought in the negative, where Rashi mentions the blessings were said in the positive. Cursed is the man who brings pesel masecha, idols, which is something which is abomination, and hides it in his house. As is pointed out by Rashi and the Rashbam and others, all these things, all these curses, are based on things that nobody sees. There's no testimony. Something that somebody does in hiding. So the first one, as I said, is if they're hiding away idols. Another one, if they hit their parents, which also happens in the house, nobody could see. They try to steal some of their neighbor's land without anybody knowing. Who tries to make a blind person go astray on the road. Somebody who tries to change the outcome for the bad of the judgments of orphans and widows. And all these things which are mentioned here are all things that somebody does and nobody is there to see it. So basically, the first thing is, what is negativity? The things described here are all things between man and man. It doesn't say about not keeping kosher. It doesn't say about not keeping the festivals. It does say about idol worship, because I said idol worship is a whole concept from a biblical point of view. It's not just sticks and stones. It's a whole mindset. But the way you relate to others, these things bring curses. And then Rashi says all these things are also said in the blessing form when the Levites point towards the mountain of Gerizim. That's the first thing I wanted to say. There's an interesting statement that Rav Chaim Volozhin says in the name of the Vilna Gaon, that the main divine service that a person has to do in this world relates to transgressions between man and man. First of all, the first thing when you build the building is an ethical platform. An ethical platform means you came to this world, don't hurt people. Once you can be on that level, then the next thing you can do is also to do good to society. And then the higher level is the spiritual level, where you create your relationship with God. But you can't create the upper floors if the basis, the first floor, is faulty. I think that's obvious. So that's something else I wanted to say about this. So what we bring into the world is going to bring a blessing or curses in our lives. Now, there is a second ma'agal, there's a second circle of things that Moses is not saying, but is mentioned in the Talmud. There are things, of course, that are beyond our control. I think that's obvious. We go to the supermarket to buy some food. But if there's a war in the land, there might not be food in the supermarket. It's not our fault. We work in order to gain our bread. But again, some things can interfere because we also live in a society. And the society today is a global society. So, of course, mankind in general is going to influence one another. And sometimes it's not our fault, but we're part of it. We are part of the world at large, both on a sociological level, and you might say on a spiritual level too. The way the world is planned in connection to our actions. This is a slightly deeper concept. The Talmud brings it in Ta'anit about the student Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar ben Padat. And the Talmud says that this Rabbi Elazar ben Padat was a poor man, and he went to have a medical procedure that they used to do in antiquity, bloodletting or cupping. That's what they did in those days. You go bloodletting, but then you have to eat something. Just like when you give blood today, you have to eat something, drink something. He didn't have any food. All he had was a stalk of garlic. So he put the garlic into his mouth. He couldn't even chew it. He just passed out. Story goes, he passes out. He finds himself soaring up to the heavens, and he's standing before God's throne. Says, God, did I have to be so poor in this world? And according to the story, God says to him in this dreamlike state, says, Elazar, my son, I am willing to destroy the world and start again right from the beginning, so that the second time, maybe you will come out a little bit economically better than your situation now. So Elazar says, Holy One, blessed be He. You're going to do all that and maybe? So he said, well, tell me, God, did I live most of my life, or do I still have most of my life to live? God says, you already lived most of it. So if I lived most of it, forget it. Thank you very much. This is a very interesting story. God says to Rabbi Elazar ben Padat, you are such a saint, I would be willing to start all over again, and maybe, because the world works by a certain design, certain features. We as human beings have a big input on what's supposed to happen. We're able to affect, if you want to put it this way, the GPS, of which the way the world goes. As individuals, less so, but as larger communities and populations, of course. So God says to Elazar, within the system, I would rather reboot just for you, but you have to realize there are other people on the planet over the generations. So I can't promise how it's going to come out because there is a design within the network. So this is the second thing that has to be understood too. There's a general design of blessing and curse, which is based on the general way that human beings act. That's why it's so important to have good leadership and to help human beings bring out the good. The third thing I want to say is based on the idea of just a question, what does it mean, blessing? I think there's also a misunderstanding of this, and this will be the last thing I talk about on this video. All blessing means plenty. Even in English, we say to have blessing in your life means to have a lot of children, a lot of money, a lot of nourishment, to have things that your needs are taken care of, and even more. That's blessing. The Hebrew too says in Devarim, God shall bless your bread and your water and your cattle. So blessing is to have a bountiful amount. But all blessing comes from God. Therefore, when we bless people, or when the Kohanim, when the priests bless people in the priestly benediction from the book of Numbers, from Devarim, it says, Yivarecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and watch over you, because blessing doesn't come from us. God is the source of blessing, and God can give blessing. So we wish somebody that God will bless them. Yivarecha Hashem mitzion urei v'tuv Yerushalayim. King David says, may God bless you from Zion, and may you see the good of Jerusalem, and may you see children of your children, and peace on Israel, in the Songs of Ascent. So blessing comes from God. The Talmud does say also in Brachot, Al tieh birkat hedyot kala beinecha. Do not take lightly the blessing of a simple person. What does that mean? When a simple person says to you, you know what, you're such a good person, I really hope you're successful. That's like a little prayer. So we're saying to God, that person needs to be successful. That person needs to be healthy. All these little prayers together, they also create blessing from God, because so many people are asking for it. So we can bless in the sense of a prayer, but we don't give blessing. God gives blessing. God is the source of blessing. Same way we don't give curses. We can request negativity. God will listen. Doesn't mean necessarily it'll happen. You can request it. It's not a good idea, because what comes around goes around. It'll be a boomerang. It's not a good idea. That's why in the book of Joshua, I want to point out, in chapter 8, what does it say? Joshua, it says in verse 30, that Joshua built the altar on the Mount of Eval like he was supposed to, like Moses told him, as it says in the Torah. And he also wrote the Mishneh Torah, which is understood as the book of Devarim, for the children of Israel. And then they did the ceremony, and all of Israel and its elderly and its judges, and they stood on the different sides, on the different mountains, on the Gerizim half and Eval half. And then he read the words of the Torah, blessings of the curses. But what does it say at the beginning? It says here, when they stood on the mountains, they did exactly what Moses said, to bless the people at the beginning, meaning as they're coming into the land. They did read the blessings and the curses, but the goal was to bless the people, meaning to request that God bless the people. The negativity is secondary, because the negativity is when you do those negative things, you bring the negativity. Who needs that? And when you do the positive things, you bring blessing. But we can also request blessing for the people in general from God. Something to think about Shalom, shalom.